everybody, and welcome to Breaktime Conversations, a YouTube channel where I have conversations around education. I have been a teacher all my life, and along my journey, I have met and continue to meet so many interesting and inspiring people. And so I decided to document my conversations with them here so that you too can hear their stories and the amazing work that they do. I'm here with the very vivacious Usha Pandit. She's a highly experienced educator with over 3 decades of teaching experience in India and the overseas, and over a decade of academic consulting and teacher training. She also has a YouTube channel called the Mind Springs English Teacher, and she's also an author and so many more. So I'm just going to leave it up to her to introduce herself further because I know there's a lot more to what I have just mentioned. Over to you, Usha.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think you've covered almost all of it. I've been in education forever, so it's not surprising that I have done so many things. I have taught in 3 countries abroad, and that has kind of contributed to who I am and what I have brought into the country when I decided to come back and teach our children. So I have adapted uh, those strategies to suit our society, our children, their aspirations, instead of simply bringing something from abroad and plonking it on them. My books have been a product of my frustration with teacher training, where I found that until you document your thoughts and ideas, and then you actually market them, and then you sell them, and then you put it on the teacher's table, which she then follows without question, unfortunately, uh, you don't seem to be pushing ahead despite many meetings and even a lot of demonstration. So this is one of the realities that have contributed to making me write those books. And then the constant demand from various places made me, I started with my coursework series called Empowering English, which I largely fashioned on the Australian curriculum because I had taught in the Australian International School in Jakarta for several years. I adapted it, of course, to the Indian needs. And then from then, it was on demand where I did language with ease, which is a linear, which goes against a linear system of grammar and does a lateral system of grammar, which is extremely successful. But again, it's a sea change from what the whole world is doing. So therefore, it's a hard sell in terms of people actually they understand it, they even experience it in my workshops, but for them to take it to schools and actually make that huge change is very, very hard. But a book is always a great solace because then you don't have to make those sentences yourself. You can kind of fall back on the book and just go and do it every single day. So that's one of the reasons why I wrote that book, the Language with Ease book, which is where grammar translates into vocabulary and writing, and you do it in 10 minutes a day. You don't do more than that. But even to get teachers to move from a 1 period grammar, which they are used to in a week, to a 10-minute grammar per day, which works out to 50 minutes in 5 days, is hard. They still hang on to the comfort zone of 1 period. And that doesn't work because there is a forgetting cycle that takes over. And you forget. So no matter how much you put into the glass, it's like a bottomless one where it just falls through. And then you end up with very little information. And then when you go into complicated levels of grammar that is required in an examination class or a board exam, or furthermore, as an elimination process in your examinations for qualifying for higher competitive exams or to migrate to another country, those are the places where you actually need it. And it fails you because your foundations are shaky. So it's worth making that change, but to sell that change is really, really difficult. So I'm coming from hard place.
I
And
totally hear you. I totally resonate with everything that you're saying so far. Yeah.
uh, it's exciting because you're doing something new every time. So all my life as a teacher has been a journey in problem solving, in creating ideas where you take a lot of risks, where you put your thoughts on the line and you pursue it, and sometimes you don't get to pursue it. You need to have a few intrepid teachers who will pursue it for you. So sometimes when I write books, the successes of those books are completely dependent on the teachers in the classroom, the few teachers in the classroom who actually move ahead and use it and believe in it and make it a success. Then I kind of sit back and say, okay, what I thought was right. But until that teacher does it, it's not possible for me to know, because I'm not attached to a school per se where I have a classroom. I mean, I used to have one ages ago, but now I don't actively teach anymore. So my pre-primary books, for example, I finished just before the lockdown. After years of doing work from 1 to 8, and as a consultant teaching classes up to 12, to demonstrate to teachers how to say poetry or creative writing should be done, I realized that a lot of the problems lay at the bottom. So your foundation years are the most pertinent years, the most significant years that you need to create value in terms of spoken language first. So there is a tendency for all of us to fill notebooks and show quantitative learning to parents as proof that we are indeed working. That needs to change. So unless you have spoken language before you hit grade 1, fairly fluent and fairly close to the mother tongue fluency that the child already has at 3. So it's not like children can't learn language, and children need a teacher to learn language. They don't. They just need exposure, and the right exposure, which is not hard to find in the age of technology. So if you do that, if you get your spoken language together, then everything falls in place. And if you don't, then you are going in for lifelong damage control. And I say lifelong where language is concerned because it is lifelong. It's not like after the 12th year, English is going to suddenly change and improve, and everything is going to become okay. It never gets better.
Yeah.
Spoken language never gets better.
Absolutely.
Never.
So I want to interrupt you here because I just want to ask you, so how do you address this spoken language issue? Because even I truly believe, like for me, for example, I grew up in a home where we spoke only English, I heard only English, which is why English comes easy to me. And I constantly tell our teachers that. So how do
Yes.
you address this issue in the classroom?
So spoken language, Anupa, needs to come from the home as much as it will come from school. A lot of the English of my generation is pretty good and strong because, very curiously, we had Anglo-Indian teachers in our pre-primary grades. They are a species that have
Yes,
just seemed to have vanished.
I know,
I don't
you're
know where
right.
they have gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were all Anglo-Indian and they spoke English because they probably learned it from their fathers, who were Brits, and our parents themselves had their education during that British period. So their English, even if they were not graduates or even if they had not completed school, whatever little they had done was good because they had picked it up from the real, the native speaker, so to speak. So it comes naturally to us. Then we come from a generation where we didn't have TV. I come from a generation where there was no TV. So there was no question of us entertaining ourselves in any other way except with a book. So it was almost a necessity. It was not something that you told children to do read, and then because your friends spoke about some book, you were forced to read it because otherwise you couldn't be part of the gang. So we come from a totally different era. We can't use our yardsticks on children today and use that as an example and say we survived and so will they won't, because their entire world is different. But having said that, by the same token, they have technology. So they don't have native speakers or parents or Anglo-Indian teachers, but they have technology, which is something like YouTube, where there are a large number of videos of all kinds that you can imagine, the kind of the plethora of material that is available in the form of stories and cartoons and science or what have you, whatever you need in English, spoken by really good speakers, is enormous. All you need to do is to make sure that the child listens to about 3 stories a day. And that's all you need. You don't, for language, when you pick it up at the the lowest rung, you do not need a massive amount of teaching. What you need is a minimal exposure on a daily basis, because that's how children pick up regional languages when they go to the playground. So if you were to be transferred to Bengal, your son or daughter would pick up Bengali by just going to play. Now, it's not like there's a lesson happening in the playground where they are, doing serious study there. They're simply playing, and the child observing and needing to use the language picks it up just so easily, everything, including pronunciation, including slang. So if we could follow nature, if we could start thinking a little bit instead of following a particular curriculum, a mode, someone who's brought in something and said that this is the way to go. If we used common sense, I think all our problems would be solved. And that technology will help that child who does not have that parent who speaks English, or that teacher who speaks English, to get there.
Very true, very true. But everything that you're saying is absolutely right, and we follow nature and things like that. But I just find that many teachers today, they don't want to follow their instinct. They don't want to follow nature. They just want to follow what's in that textbook. They just want to follow what's required of them, do their job and leave. So I know that you said that you wrote these books out of frustration, so I'm sure this is the one of the frustrations that you have felt. So do you want to shed more light on this, on how you...
So teachers doing that is a convenience, which we need to recognize as an adult convenience. Now, principals and managements condoning that and kind of not really pushing for the right thing is again an adult convenience, because you don't want the teacher to leave, you don't want to look for another one, you really don't want to put yourself out on a limb and rock the boat. You don't want any of that. So you will find a lot of principals and managements actually towing the line. So if you went there and told them that this is the way to do it, and you really need to start looking at it like this, you'll find a lot of rebellion. And you'll find a lot of managements that will push you out simply because they do not want the kind of disturbances that you have created. So this happens a lot. So that is one thing. The other thing is, your government doesn't really care, isn't it? So they will bring in their policies that they think are populist, and then they'll go away, and then another one will come and change everything. So in spite of having gone through these cycles, we are still adamant in our need to say that we need to listen to that government and not change anything. So yes, so there is everybody else that we will somehow blame or use in order to make sure that we don't change anything. So this, I think, is a problem. I think we need to understand that it is the child's future that we are kind of affecting. So so one of the ways in which we can address a lot of problems is through teacher training. So teachers are actually in fear. There's a huge amount of fear. There isn't a strong philosophy of teaching from where they're coming. So to address all that, you need to do a lot of training. Training can't be token. Training can't be once in twice a year in order to say we trained. It needs to be very serious training that is given by schools, where they believe that the more you train, the better the teacher population is going to be, even if they start moving schools from here to there. So you're not kind of investing in one particular teacher, you're investing in a culture. So this is the first thing that needs to happen. Secondly, the workshops that I did during the lockdown, I trained about 800 teachers because they had nothing to do but sit at home. So they trained with me on creative writing and on poetry, and we did grammar. And in a lot of those workshops, I did what I just told you. So I actually moved them into layering of learning, which means that you don't say something once, but you kind of touch it again and again like a feather duster so that it actually keeps clean and your memory is stronger because of that. For creative writing, for example, we did something called collective feedback. So you could not expect me to have, from week to week, kind of corrected 250 papers, because what I did in those workshops, I actually gave them a paper to write at the end of each session, which they struggled, they cried, but they did. But I didn't give them individual feedbacks because that would have become not only rigorous and time consuming, but they would have just looked at a lot of red marks and possibly come to the conclusion that there's no hope for them or they are amazing or whatever. But what I did was I scanned through all the papers, picked up commonalities where there were struggles, and I also printed into that feedback, collective feedback, the best of writing so that they can see what they can aspire to and what their colleagues actually are, at what level they are. Some of them were absolutely at the top international level, and that is something I celebrated with them. So that's a huge morale building exercise, which I think all of that can be replicated in a classroom, where at the higher classes, you do exactly what I did by giving them a 30-page collective feedback at the end of an essay that they have written. And in the lower classes, you can actually use that as teaching material for error correction, for better sentences, or what have you, ideation, etc. I also made teachers do a lot of material building. So they actually wrote question papers, they did ideation, they did a whole bunch of work through which they probably took back 400 to 600 pages of feedback or material creation that was shared. So I think it was brilliant. And even today, those teachers come back, whatever workshop I throw out, they all come back because the experience that was there was absolutely robust. So that's what I did for, where I did my
So
workshop.
is this collective feedback something that we can do with students as well?
Yes. So when if you give an essay in a classroom and you have 30 students writing it, so in fact, everything should be done collectively, if you ask me. Sharing is learning. So there was a school where I once did a turnkey on creative writing. I used to just go for that period and teach them that and come out. Did it for about 5 months. You know what I did? I gave them all the current topics. That first I showed them how to mind map something, and then I gave them all the current topics for a Diwali holiday, and they brought back mind maps of 30 topics, current topics. And then we passed them around in a relay to add more materials in another ink. And then I took home 30 papers and added my own ideas and then built it into a book and gave it to them for study. It was a cakewalk. Now I ask you, what would you have done? You would have given them one essay to write during the Diwali holidays and then spent your post-holiday time and leisure in micro-correcting those papers, and those children would have got nothing out of it. The tragedy of it, the simplicity of what you can do, and the tragedy of how much work teachers do and kill themselves with completely befuddles me, Anupa. It's a tragedy. So that is something. Now, if you gave an essay and you wanted collective feedback, do the same thing. Take it all up, keep a paper, start writing down all the commonalities where errors are occurring or where the class is collectively doing something that maybe they haven't understood from the instruction that you gave them. It could be anything, but it gives you an opportunity to feedback, to reteach. It gives you material for testing. And then after you reteach, test the reteach, weed out the errors so that it doesn't go up to the next class. Otherwise, you will find that errors in grade 3 exist in grade 11.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
don't seem to go away.
So
And they never
I
will.
I think this will be great because even for the teacher and for the school, they can know which areas they are falling behind, right? Yeah.
Yes, and it's better, it's easier, and every time you succeed, there is a sense of satisfaction in the teacher and in everybody. If you do a map of how you're doing and where you were and where you've reached, you can share it with your parents, and they're going to be thrilled with it. They're not going to ask you for notes. Believe me. But I've said this, but happening, doing it is another issue. I mean, people assume it will take a lot of time. They say, oh, how can you give collective feedback? What will parents say? In fact, after you give collective feedback, if you ask people, do you want individual feedback? They say, no, we don't want it. We want collective. But then you give it to them as a choice, either this or that. But you need to try everything once to see how amazing it is, you know?
Yeah, I think it's the trying something new that all is always the problem, right?
It
So then
is,
they
it
always
is.
think that there's going to be a problem, it's going to be time consuming. That just because it's just
It's
something new.
just, it's all in the head.
Mind.
It's
Yeah,
not really true. It actually makes it faster. The
correct.
more collective work that you kind of encourage in a class, especially in our classrooms where you have this large number of children sitting in front of you, 40 kids, and they say, what can you do with 40 kids? What can you not do with 40 kids is what I'm asking.
Yeah, I know it's
You need
all in the
to
mind.
change that format. You
Yes.
cannot teach 40 kids the way you teach 10, because then it won't work.
Yes. It has been so amazing. And I just want to ask you, one last question, just because you've had so much of experience and you have been around for so long and you've also been working in other countries as well. Is there a difference that you see from teachers before, teachers today? And what do you think the future holds for teachers? Like, just look at the past, present, and future.
See, change will come, will happen. So it's not like change will not happen and we will always be in this state. Life will not allow you to do that. So if you look at a whole bunch of terms that we know today, that the teachers know today, if you say HOTS, everybody knows what it is. So it's not like you have to explain to them. If you say genre, all teachers know. When I started 10 years ago, 15 years ago, nobody knew what genre was. You had to explain it to them. They didn't know what euphemism was. So a lot of terminology, because of the kind of say workshops people have done or YouTube or technology or whatever, digital exposure. People know a lot today. Teachers know. So I wouldn't say that they are the same teachers that they were 20 years ago at all. In the future also, I expect that change to go on. So what I'm saying to you today probably will take 10 years to come in, but it will, because it's all it takes is a certain mass, a critical mass of people who follow, who believe and follow and show that it works. Then everybody kind of starts taking to it immediately. So change is always like that. I may not see it in my lifetime, but it's something that will certainly happen. What has muddied it a little bit, according to me, and what has kind of retarded this change a little bit is the large number of people who have jumped into education. So you find a whole lot of education providers who have popped into education without having taught a single class in their whole lives. So they have no idea what a classroom is, but they're telling you what to do and how to do it. And, they're bringing in all sorts of gadgets and gimmicks and technology and digital stuff and everything else and saying, do this, do that. But if you actually ask them for their philosophy, you will find that it is based on the kind of old traditional format that we have always followed. That hasn't changed. It's all the bells and whistles that are kind of changing around it to make it, embellish it, and make it look pretty and make it look progressive. But essentials need to change in terms of pedagogy, like the sharing that I told you. It's not just a word, isn't it? That's the other thing. People use a lot of jargon, language. Again, it's a sort of a feel good thing. So you say child centered, you say critical thinking without actually knowing. So if you say pause for a minute and say, show me a couple of behaviors in your classrooms that show critical thinking, they'd be stumped because they don't even know what it means. See, but you're saying it because it sounds nice. Problem solving sounds very nice. How much innovation are your children doing? At the end of a chapter, can you show me innovative processes? So if you ask for behaviors, you will find that, and I don't blame them. They just need training. See, again, you need training, and then you need implementation after that training. You can't go back to square one after you train. You need somebody out there who will supervise to find out if that training is actually being implemented in the classroom. So there are some of these bits and pieces that need to come together, and I think we'll get there. We're an intelligent people.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
We are a very intelligent people. We just have so many little things that pull us back.
Correct.
And if we get that act together, nothing can stop us.
Absolutely. And like you said, we have everything at our fingertips right now, lots of information. We just need to use it in the right way. Yeah.
That's all.
It has been such a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much. Like, wonderful to talk to such an experienced person like you. And thank you for giving us a message of hope that change will come.
Yes, change will come and it will be good. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Anupa. It was a pleasure.
Thank you and bye for now.